evening. Good evening and welcome very, very much to this opening segment of Conversations this evening, where we're pleased to welcome once again Ed Rosenfeld, who's been a guest in the past. And Ed is the editor and founder of an extremely exciting and pace-setting newsletter here in the American economy called Intelligence, the Future of Computing. And Ed, welcome once again to Conversation.
Nice to be here, Harold.
I wonder if you might share with us, you've been concerned with a great number of things over your career and so forth, but this intelligence newsletter that you have has been coming out for some time now, and you've been concerned with the area, particularly of what they call artificial intelligence. Maybe you could share once again in a thumbnail way the journal itself or the newsletter and when you got started in it, and then we could talk some about leading edge developments within this leading edge aspect of computer technology. But maybe share a little bit the newsletter just briefly, if you would, for us.
Well, about 2 years ago I began to notice that what had been in the past an ivory tower academic research discipline known as artificial intelligence was starting to yield some real products, some actual applications, some things that you could do with computers that people would consider smart, people would consider intelligent. And that's kind of a thumbnail definition of artificial intelligence, getting a computer to do something that if a person did it, we would consider it intelligent behavior. And seeing that the research benefits were starting to turn into applications, I thought that there was going to be a real development in terms of the business aspects, certainly in computing, of these artificial intelligence applications. So a little over a year and a half ago, I started putting together the newsletter, and we've been publishing now for just over a year. We celebrated our first anniversary this past spring.
Congratulations.
It's going real well, and I'm very pleased about it. And we focus on the future of computing, which includes a lot of other technologies besides artificial intelligence. But the real excitement in terms of the leading edge of computing is in the artificial intelligence area. Artificial intelligence covers lots and lots of different topics. We hear about expert systems, we hear about speech synthesis and voice recognition, we hear about robotics, vision systems that enable robots to see the pieces that they're picking up and what they're doing. All of these various things, all of these pattern recognition and other kinds of technologies are very important in artificial intelligence, which is kind of a catch-all title.
All these things have been developing almost, well, I suppose against the longer sweep, exponentially in the modern experience. These things are coming so rapidly, and many of the developments had been research developments in university laboratories, university physics departments and so forth, and there's increasingly being able to see application of that research finding in the real world, as it were, of product development and so forth, and that's more or less what's making people become more and more interested in this all the time, in a sense,
right,
beyond the academic concern, intellectual concern.
There are several models that academics and researchers developed in trying to make computers more intelligent. One is a neurophysiological model. In other words, let's try and make computers like brains, or operate in the way that a brain might operate, or in the way that a brain's memory might be organized. Another model comes from the cognitive sciences and cognitive psychology. And this is a more cognitive model of how we think, not necessarily the hardware or wetware that we use to think, but rather the process of thinking. So there are many computer systems modeled after that. And then there are systems modeled after different forms of philosophy, which in turn are models of the way we think and the way we are. Logic has played a very important part in some of the opening products that have been coming out in the artificial intelligence area. Perhaps the most exciting products that are coming out are expert systems.
Hey, what is that? What is an expert system?
Well, generally an expert system is a computer system that allows the expertise of someone who has a particular command of a given subject area or a particular skill. It enables that expertise to be coded in a way so that it can be placed into a computer system. And others who might not have that skill or have the experience of the expert would be privy to his or her expertise by way of the coded computer program.
And that's growing a great deal. There's a great deal of use of that now, huh?
A great deal. The oil companies were probably most responsible. Schlumberger, a great oil services company, put a lot of money, put millions of dollars into the development of expert systems that would enable them to look at satellite data, look at ore samples, look at other kinds of evidence, and see where's it right to drill, where's our best chance of drilling. Now normally people would do that, And what you're doing is taking the expertise these people have, the intelligent way they look at something, figuring out what kinds of logical rules their selection process is based on, and trying to embed those rules in the computer. One of the more exciting programs that's now in a developmental stage is a program called Internist, which takes a doctor, and he's a diagnostician, and someone who's very adept at computer programs, who's also adept at getting information out of specialists, and this is a kind of a new field known as knowledge engineering, sat down with this doctor, a doctor named Jack Myers, and took Jack Myers' way of doing diagnosis and put it into a rule-based system of an expert system, which they call Internist. And that system tested against the test cases that appear regularly in the New England Journal of Medicine, did better than all but the people who make up the test cases.
Is that right, really?
Providing correct diagnoses.
Yeah, that's amazing. The implications of that are pretty staggering in a sense, right? I mean, they're very, very interesting that kind of thing could develop. And that's part of is that part of the artificial intelligence development?
Yes, that's very definitely part of artificial intelligence. As a matter of fact, expert systems are I would say the place where more money is going in terms of government and industry allocation for research development, for applications. It's really going in the expert systems area. There are perhaps hundreds of millions of dollars committed worldwide to developing expert systems and these kinds of logic or rule-based systems.
Yeah, and they have some systems within artificial intelligence. I know they've taken the model of the brain itself, or the neurobiological model, as one. Back in the 50s or 60s, there was a pattern developed.
Well, this was a very exciting area of the research that started in the late 1950s, and throughout the 1960s there was a great deal of excitement. It was known as neural networks or neural nets. And the idea was that the human brain is more powerful than other brains, not because it operates very fast. It doesn't operate at the speed of light. It's an electrochemical series of processes and reactions. And there are a great many neurons, but what makes the brain so powerful is not just the sheer number of neuron cells, but the interconnections. We have 10 billion neurons in our brain, and each one of them is capable of somewhere between 10 and 25,000 separate interconnections.
Yes.
And so the suspicion was if we could model computer systems after neural networks, then we might really have something. And unfortunately, in the late 1960s, a great deal of hope and a great many claims had been made for the work of many people, but most prominently Frank Rosenfeld of Cornell, who had developed something called the perceptron, which was a neural networking system. And he patented the system. And when it came time for the system to demonstrate its wares, it was unfortunately a resounding failure. And so in the early 1970s, some of the deans of the academic end of artificial intelligence said, this is really a dead end, and this is not a really profitable place for us to be doing our research. And I think we can kind of mark that that time period as the ascendancy of the expert systems as the neural networking systems went into decline.
But and now, as I understand, that's being re-picked up again. We've talked with the company Nestor and so forth, but that's being re-picked up. That modeling of the is that being picked up again now?
Yes. Leon Cooper and Charles Elbaum, developing the Nestor system, have taken a neural networking approach. And it was interesting, they were starting their researches at just about the same time that Marvin Minsky and other notables in the field of artificial intelligence, also known as AI, were saying, hey, this is not the right way to go.
A lot of roads to Jerusalem,
I think probably one of the things that helped Cooper and Elbaum is that they were not coming out of the computer sciences, they were coming out of physics. And they were very excited by new findings in the memory sciences and the neurosciences, and I think that gave them a different tack. But they're not alone in the field in terms of the research. They're very singular in terms of the product they have, which I think we'll be seeing a tape of later.
Yes, right,
but there are other researchers, University of California, San Diego, Carnegie Mellon University, the electrotechnical laboratories in Japan, great many activities ongoing in the neural net area.
People that are following that drift of research and so forth toward a system of self-learning and a pattern recognizing capability modeled upon the human brain, the biophysiological model, which is key to the Nestor development. It sets them apart in certain sense in terms of artificial intelligence, or this leading edge artificial intelligence, which in a certain sense represents leading edge research and development in terms of computer?
I think Nestor is set apart because not only have they done the research and done the theoretical, background work that they had to do to develop these theories and develop formulas that would make these theories operate, but they have now gone ahead and built systems and delivered those systems to other people to sell. And they're singular in that way. And I think we're going to see a rise of these systems. The reason that neural networking-based systems are important is because there's an old adage in computing, garbage in, garbage out. And these systems based on neural networks, which I call adaptive systems, are systems that don't require programming. They are self-programming. They are systems that learn by themselves. The Nestor system, as a specific example, learns to recognize unconstrained handwritten characters in one particular product application that they've already built. And most systems recognize something by matching it against a model or a template that the system has within itself. So if you tell a computer system that all E's are made of straight lines, and you show an E made of curved lines, a system that's comparing to a template made of straight lines isn't going to find a curved line system. An adaptive system, on the other hand, says, I don't know what you're showing me, teach me. And if you teach it, it then learns to recognize what are the salient characteristics of that particular pattern without necessarily knowing in advance what to look for.
It's learning.
It's learning. That's what we do. We abstract and pick things that are of significance out of patterns all the time as we go through life.
Exciting development, it really is. And as I say, we were up there. We have some footage of the people at Nestor, and I thought maybe this would be we could take a break now here in our discussion, yours and my discussion, and maybe we could come back at the tail end. But we have a piece coming up that we could insert here with Professor Cooper and the others up at the Nestor company, or the Nestor offices in Providence at Brown University, where they are. So maybe we could take a look at that tape, which demonstrates somewhat of Nestor's development, which is unique, and as you say, in a certain sense, sets them apart. And then after we've completed that, maybe you and I can come back and round this out and see what some of the other applications and the significance of that is.
Sounds great.
Okay, so if you just stay tuned in a second, we'll be coming up with an interview and some demonstration of the Nestor system, which is a unique and interesting one momentarily. So that's coming right up, and then Ed and I'll come back and close this out. So we'll see in a few moments, and enjoy this discussion now coming up with people at Nestor Incorporated, Providence, Rhode Island, and we're coming right back then. Very much to Conversations, where tonight we're in Providence, Rhode Island at a company, a very exciting company in terms of advanced leading-edge technology, that being Nestor Incorporated, and we're very anxious to introduce the three guests that we have for this segment who are core to the company, and to talk some about this very exciting technology. And if I may introduce first, it's Dr. Charles Elbaum, who is chairman of the physics department at Brown University, where he's been a professor of physics since 1963, specializing in experimental solid-state physics, including the design of circuits and information processing systems. He is a fellow of the American Physical Society, a member of several scientific and professional societies, and is the author of many publications. Dr. Elbaum, welcome very, very much to Conversations. In the middle is Dr. Co-chairman of the company, along again with Dr. Elbaum, co-chairman, is Dr. Leon Cooper, has been a professor of physics at the Brown University since 1962. He was awarded the Comstock Prize by the National Academy of Sciences in 1968, and the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1972. He is a fellow of the American Physical Society of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, a member of the American Philosophical Society, and is the author also of many publications. And Dr. Leon Cooper, welcome very much to Conversations as well. And thirdly, we have the Director or Vice President of Marketing with the company, that being Terry R. Rollo. He heads up the sales management position in Europe, the Middle East, and the United States with IBM. He did Storage Technology and National Advanced Systems, and Terry, also welcome very, very much to Conversations. And gentlemen, indeed, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I wonder if you might give us, Terry, for the general audience is viewing a thumbnail sketch of the company Nestor Incorporated. Perhaps you could start it out here. It's an exciting technology that you're involved with here at Nestor, isn't it?
It certainly is, Harold, yes. As you mentioned earlier, it's extremely exciting. What we're going to talk about and show you are systems which display a brain-like capability to learn by their own experiences. And that sounds rather abstract, but what we will show you is systems which can be applied in the field in everyday commercial use, for example, to read characters optically, like the handwritten amounts on bank checks, and indeed to perform many pattern recognition functions in similar ways to the way that the human brain does it.
I see, where it's a technological development that has increasingly can be seen some practical application, but it has a tremendous theoretical basis and physics and mathematical developments and technological developments that have made this technological aspect possible in this particular time.
It certainly has. My colleagues, Professor Cooper and Professor Elbaum, are probably better qualified to talk about the theoretical and the academic, if you like, scientific aspects of it. My preoccupation, if you like, is finding potential licensees for our technology out there in the marketplace, so that we can take this technology into the market in a commercial way, in the very near future.
I wonder, gentlemen, do you think this is a leading-edge technology in terms of our computing capability?
I think perhaps the way to characterize in just a few words is that in order to make any computer do a practical task involves writing a long and very complex set of instructions. And this can be done for a whole variety of tasks. The point of what we're doing is our systems, so to speak, like the instructions themselves. That is to say, if they are applied to a task, the strongest contrast between our systems and conventional systems, as you might say, and I'm using words a little bit freely, is our systems learn by experience. And in the end, the internal set of instructions that is written to tell them to do what they finally do, which might be recognizing characters or recognizing letters or any one variety of tasks like that, the program, the set of instructions, has been written by the system itself internally. And I would say this in one sentence is the distinction between these systems and other systems that are on the market.
It includes a tremendous amount of, a tremendous breakthrough, in a sense, in terms of the efficiencies that can be realized with such a system that can learn.
Well, you see, the thing is,
breakthrough from
the traditional approach has always been a computer is a system that can execute large numbers of instructions with accuracy and at incredible speed. And in order to get them to do something, the idea has always been to write a program with these large numbers of instructions. But when you have a real-world problem, let's say like riding a bicycle, or if you think of the number of instructions one would have to write to handle every situation that you might encounter, you see that although it's not impossible, it becomes backbreaking.
Has it been the pattern that we've been following with the history of computing development by and large?
Probably the strongest trend, the dominant trend among computers has been the attempt to write complex programs to solve real-world problems. There are other trends. We can't go into all of them in a small space of time, but our point of view has been that animal systems, including humans, learn partially by having a set of instructions, but the most important part of our learning seems not to come via an explicit set of instructions. It seems to come via being placed in real-world situations and learning by the experience. And what we felt was the thing that was most lacking in systems that existed was this capacity to learn by experience. Now, our systems can have explicit instructions written into them, but in that sense, they're not different from conventional systems. The single marvelous new feature they have is the ability to actually learn without having the instructions explicitly written.
What is it that gives it that ability?
Well, let me give you an example of a practical nature, if I may, which perhaps will illustrate it somewhat. A favorite example of ours is to discuss the way a child learns how to read. It is common for all of us to realize that in order to teach a child how to read, we don't represent, say, a letter A and telling Johnny a letter A consists of two inclined lines joined by a small horizontal segment. He keeps showing this letter A repeatedly until Johnny learns that this particular shape represents a letter A. Johnny has a representation of what that letter actually is in his own system. And likewise, when we present a written letter, for example, to our system, it forms an internal representation of that letter, and then whenever it sees like representations presented to it at a subsequent time, it recognizes those as being the letter which it has learned as representing A or B or C.
In a primitive way similar to the human mind itself.
We can't say that.
We don't say,
we can't say that. We have theoretical. We have theoretical ideas as how the central nervous system organizes itself. But whether this piece of electronics, this piece of software, is a model of that or not, is not really the relevant question. It may be or it may be in part. The point is it functions in some ways. Now, let me just expand on what Charles just said. Suppose you were teaching a child the letter A and the letter B. There are two things it must learn. It must learn to generalize from the individual A's you have drawn to the entire class. It must learn to generalize the same about the B's, and it must distinguish the class of A's from the class of B's. Now, that, in a way, is in a nutshell the entire problem. And what this system will do, related to a question you asked previously, it will generalize as it sees you generalizing, and it will make the distinctions as it sees you making the distinctions. And if you make them incorrectly, it will make them incorrectly too.
But it can learn from a pattern that is presented to. Is it pattern recognition that we're talking about?
Pattern recognition is the easiest way to visualize it, because you can see the pattern in front of you and you can see the recognition process. But in fact, this capacity is much more powerful. The patterns that the system is seeing are really very abstract patterns, which are the representations of the patterns drawn on the pad or on the page.
It's an exciting technological development, and one that is, would it be fair to say, in your estimation,
we feel it's exciting.
Of course, but would it be fair to say that it's on the leading edge of computer theoretical and practical application of computer technology?
We feel that it's on the leading edge. You know, maybe we shouldn't judge.
It is, and what distinguishes it from, let's say, computer science development in general, or what's coming out of other laboratories?
Perhaps one way to characterize it is to allude again to what Leon was saying a moment ago. In conventional computer approaches, one writes explicit, well-defined programs that characterize every feature of a problem to be solved. Whether it's a multiplication or whether it's a description of an object, one writes a very clear, well-defined, explicit program. In this system, by contrast, the program is not written explicitly. What the system does is form an internal representation of what it is shown or what it is presented with,
and can learn from it.
And can learn from that and eventually generalize.
I think that's a very, very important feature of these systems, and that is that when the system is shown a pattern, it knows for itself what the salient features of that pattern are that it needs to extract and store in order for it to perform subsequent recognition. The key thing being, as Charles has pointed out, without having to be told what salient features to look for.
I'd just like to amend one word. It's a key important point. The system, I wouldn't say it knows, but it extracts for itself. It has to decide what the important features are, and in the end, you might say it knows. One has to be careful about that.
It knows.
You've asked a question. You see, there have been many trends in computer sciences and in artificial intelligence, and if you wanted to characterize us as one of these trends, it's a trend that began in the early 60s and then was cut short for a whole variety of technical and psychological reasons. And I think it's fair to say that the main line of thinking has gone in another direction. The line of thinking that we are pursuing, I believe, is becoming fashionable again. And I think we're at the very forefront of that fashion.
The main line of thinking that has been taken would have led through the 1, 2, 3, 4th generation they speak of and so forth.
Well, the main line of thinking would have been to write explicit and detailed programs for every situation.
And up into supercomputers possibly, they can just use
great number.
Go faster. But in that same mode, and you're thinking in terms of a different, I don't know, paradigm or a different strategy, right?
The proper way to put it is that what we have, properly speaking, is not a computer in the conventional sense. It is a machine, it is something that can be simulated in a computer. but it is not, in a certain sense, it's not really related. It's not the same line of reasoning as the von Neumann computer that executes one instruction after another.
Are there many people, or many avenues of research now increasingly following upon your work that's moving this and rediscovering this new
direction? The field
direction?
is suddenly burgeoning, and whereas 10 years ago the idea of doing parallel processing and self-organizing systems was out of fashion, and nowadays parallel processing is in the height of fashion.
Yes.
And one of the questions in parallel processing is how do you build a system with large numbers of parallel units, a general purpose system? The idea being you can build a special purpose system, but the question is how do you program a general purpose system? And one way of characterizing what we have is a general purpose parallel system that can program itself for any specific situation.
Incredibly exciting development, and people are beginning to find it, so yeah.
Ordinarily, in the current applications of parallel systems, people make an effort to convert the existing approaches, which have been developed over the last 40 or so years, to write programs for serial computers and take those programs or some aspects of them and convert them for use in parallel systems. Ours is a design which is parallel from the outset. It has been conceived of and put together as a parallel system ab initio, and therefore represents a different line of approach, a different strategy, and a different architecture.
I think one of the things you might keep in mind, I mean, is that you will see these parallel systems that Charles is talking about simulated in the
demonstration that we'll have coming up later.
I think one of the things that you might keep in mind is that although the patterns drawn will be letters or numbers that you can recognize, but that has been done for ease of demonstration. It's not necessary for this system to be trained to learn patterns that you can recognize at all.
Or you can have patterns that it can recognize.
That's right.
And then organize itself internally.
It's just that you don't know if it's right or wrong unless you can recognize the pattern yourself. And the easiest way to do that is to talk in terms of a set of numbers, for example, that you will recognize.
I wonder if you share with me, we talk in terms of the fifth generation emerging Japanese challenge to fifth generation. Where does the Nestor technology fit in terms of, let's say, the American perspective in terms of computing leadership and so forth? And where does it fit into that general question of the fifth generation questions that's on some
we believe that we have the capacity to do some of the things that people say they want to do with fifth generation computers. Fifth generation computers is it's a term that means supercomputers, that is to say fast computers, and also computers that may have some kind of intelligence in them, and also that may be friendly to the user. It's used as sort of a melange. What we believe we have to add are systems that are quote, intelligent, unquote, systems that learn by experience, and systems that can be super friendly. As you will see, if you want to train a system, you can think, when you watch the demonstration, remember there's a very complex program in there. If you want to train it and change that program, you don't have to go back and look through the various lines of Fortran. You change it on the spot there in the most user-friendly way possible. You say, I'd like you to recognize this letter, I'd like you to make this distinction, and it learns to do it and incorporates it in the rest of the program. Now, how much user-friendlier can you get?
How much easier can it be?
And you can make it recognize a symbol of your own choosing. You draw a little man or a little house and call it a house, and it will recognize that as a house. And it can, of course, expand to much more complicated shapes, ideas, and concepts. This particular demonstration only serving to illustrate what we are talking about in a manner that is easy to see, easy to recognize, and to identify.
So the way you have to visualize it is that the system is a very complex set of rules that it has written itself. And you want to change the rules in some subtle way. Now, with traditional programs, that's very hard to do because you have to be careful about all kinds of interactions between one rule and another. And here you really do it the way you would change, almost the way you would change a rule. That's right.
The rules of the game, right.
Exactly.
And somehow, if we are asked to learn another character, we can learn that character and integrate it with all the others we know.
Yes. Right.
And it's a very complex process.
Well, in that sense, it is getting closer to the human thought process.
We like to be careful because the fact that a system mimics the behavior of another system doesn't mean that it's working the same way internally. Now, if you ask for our personal opinion, we'd say that there probably is a resemblance. But we like to be prudent and cautious about it.
But we haven't taken well, I suppose all of these things have, in a certain sense, taken the mind or the brain as a model in a certain sense. But
there is a certain
I suppose that's
background, if you will, in the sense that this type of system has, in fact, evolved from studies and inquiries made initially about the way a neural network operates. But this does not necessarily mean that this particular approach is exactly that taken by the real neural network.
No,
it performs similar functions.
Patterns that you learn from that pattern.
We're very heavily involved in trying to
But one has
understand.
to be very prudent and careful about making this distinction, because the claims for this system are different, if you will, from the claims that may be made as to how an actual neural network operates.
I see.
The claim here is that this particular system performs certain functions in a neural network-like manner, but not necessarily by the same strategy, although it may be.
We're cautious and scientific, yes, right. Well, there's a great deal of scientific and careful thought that's going into this.
We can give you the following honest background. We have been intimately involved, and we've been constructing theories and trying to compare them with experiments as to how actual neural networks assemble themselves and work. Now, when you look at neural networks, you see that there must be a large amount of parallel processing. The individual units are relatively slow, and they're not terribly accurate. So that if it is going to function at all, and it seems to function because we're talking to each other, if it is going to function at all, it is obvious from the beginning as a qualitative matter that it must be employing a method of organization that's quite different from the way computers are traditionally organized. And now, thinking about that and realizing that you could make electronic embodiments of it leads one to certain electronic constructions. Now, the electronic constructions have interesting properties, and it's not clear whether they mimic entirely the neural network. And it's inevitable. If, for example, you're interested in the problem of locomotion, you won't necessarily arrive at a method of locomotion that mimics exactly the way a human being walks.
Right.
Invent a bicycle or a wheel. And so I think when Charles is hesitant, what he's saying is that it seems as though some of the functions here are like the functions that we can achieve in memory and learning and so on, but it's not clear that they're being done internally in exactly the same way. However, if you pushed us, we would say that it seems as though some of the underlying principles must have some similarity. That's
a separate opinion. This is certainly our conviction, but we do not necessarily want to impart that conviction to anybody else as an explanation of the systems.
Nor is that philosophical conviction necessarily applicable to the practical application of the technology itself. I mean, it's a theoretical thing.
The other thing is that the brain itself is an immensely complex combination of probably dozens, maybe hundreds of different systems. And if this has any resemblance at all, it might have a resemblance to one of those components, one of those subsystems. And so, you are comparing, let's say, a gear with an entire airplane.
Yes,
and
I
one has to be
understand.
very careful.
It is exciting. It is exciting.
I think my colleagues have really summed it up very succinctly by saying that, in a sense, how we do it compared to how the human brain does it is not in itself terribly important. The fact is, we appear to get the same kind of result.
Right. And that is increasingly from, let's say, theoretical work that's been involved and so forth, is coming around to where it can have a real practical application in terms of the organization of the society and economic consequences and so forth, and that's important.
Well, the time span between seminal scientific ideas and practical applications can be long, but when it comes, it can be significant.
That's right, and it's coming very almost exponentially now, but there's a great deal more and exciting research ahead and developments. The future is even more exciting than the past.
The future is more exciting than the past. The future, if it comes, will certainly be more exciting.
Well, listen, we're looking forward to being able to have a demonstration of the system to show some of the practical applications. So really thank you very much and congratulate you on the long work and the patents you hold for this and so forth. And we're going to be doing some more and demonstrating the system.
And I encourage your readers not to listen to us, but to watch the demonstration.
We're going to watch the demonstration very, very clearly.
let them see for themselves.
So let them
You can
also...
see, I'm back in the Middle Ages when people still did.
All right, we're all in favor of that kind of practical application and these kind of things that will show, but it also has a tremendous theoretical background between it, and I congratulate all of you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Please stay tuned. We'll be coming back. We'll be coming right back and giving the demonstration momentarily of the system. But again, gentlemen, thank you very, very much indeed. This is part of a segment on this exciting company, again, it's Nestor Incorporated. We're coming right back. We're going to give you a demonstration of the system now. And once again, gentlemen, congratulations. Thank you very, very much for participating in this segment of the program. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you.
Hello, welcome back. We're speaking now with Dr. Douglas Reilly, and Dr. Reilly is, I might just read briefly, received his doctorate degree in physics from Brown University, where he was a research associate and assistant professor of research at the Center for Neuroscience until he joined the company. And Dr. Reilly, welcome very, very much to the program.
Thank you.
You're going to demonstrate it for us here, exactly some of the application of the system. I wonder if maybe you could explain in an overall sense what we have here before us. We have a keypad and so forth. Maybe explain what we have.
Right. Well, to start with, what we have here is a digitizing tablet, a bit pad. And what you draw on the bit pad gets communicated to this computer.
I see.
Now, on the computer, we have a program running which simulates the Nestor system. And what the Nestor system does is learn to recognize patterns. In this case, the patterns it's learning to recognize are the patterns that you draw on the bit pad. So, for example, if I draw a picture of a number,
now you've drawn the number 2
that's right,
on this pad.
number 2. And what you see pictured here on this screen is just a picture of what the computer sees, what the Nestor system sees, and up here is a classification that the Nestor system gives to this pattern.
So it's taking this stylized 2, if I can say the right term, and put it into
That's right. Well, this 2 is in a sense not that stylized. It's basically an unconstrained handwritten character, an example of a 2. These 2s look very different, and yet the Nestor system recognizes both of them as 2s.
There's 2, right.
Now, this is not doing it in a way that has required us to program into the computer what a 2 looks like, or what all 2s look like.
Right.
Rather, it's able to recognize these things regardless of how different they appear.
Yeah.
Now, the Nestor system that we're showing you here is one which has learned to classify examples of unconstrained handwritten numerals, just the numbers 0 through 9. So if I draw those numbers on this sheet, you'll see the Nestor system recognizing them.
Yes, even though they're drawn differently and so forth, they can...
I'm not drawing any particular font or style here. I can draw 4s that look like that, or I can draw 4 that looks like that, and basically the Nestor system calls both of them the same.
That's really very, very interesting, and it's put into the system as a standard there. Yeah,
that's
4.
right. This is what the Nestor system is calling it, and this is what the Nestor system is seeing.
That's really...
Now, in a sense, the whole world of knowledge of the system at this point is basically the numbers 0 through 9.
Yeah.
If we want to train it to recognize something else, for instance, if I draw this, which is an A, and it's not seen any examples of A's before, all I need to do to train it, it calls it a 6 at this point, which is not too unreasonable since it looks a little bit like a 6, more like a 6 than any other number. All I want to do to train it is simply tell it that's an A.
Train it.
That's right. And just remember that this is a system which is learning as it sees, learning from its experience. So I draw again, and it says, no, I still think it's a 6. And so I say, no, that's an A. Basically, I'm acting as a teacher now for the system. Now I draw again, and here again is an A that I've drawn, and here the Nestor system calls it an A. Now, the thing to notice is that the A's that I've drawn in the sheet look very different.
Yeah.
So what the Nestor system is doing is it's generalizing as it sees examples of A's.
I see. And it had thought it was a 6.
That's right.
And what did you push on the keypad?
Just simply the key A.
Oh, I see.
Now, if you were to try to do this using conventional artificial intelligence procedures, you have to first sit down and mathematically describe all the things that are common to these particular examples of A's.
Good heavens.
And that's a hard problem to do. And in fact, in some cases, it can be so difficult you wouldn't want to do it.
Yes, right.
In this case, what we've allowed the system to do is basically to focus on what it needs to do to learn to recognize those characters. So it assembles this information on its own. And what its task is to learn to extract what's come to all those A's and to distinguish them from the things that it might confuse it with. For instance, I've drawn a 6 now, and it does not confuse a 6 with the A.
Now, what does it come up? 6.
The first A...
You will have learned that previously. Oh, I see you had already done it.
It's learned it just by example. The same way that you and I learn, by experience. Now, it can make very fine distinctions. For example, if I draw this, it says it's a 6. And again, that
looks like a 6.
Looks like a 6.
Right.
But I can insist that, in fact, it's the 2-letter pattern CE.
Oh, we hadn't gotten into that. Right, okay.
Again, that's not a pattern, it's not a classification that it's seen before. So to train it, again, all I need to do is show it another example. That's in the classification.
CE.
It still calls it a 6.
It's still calling it a 6, right?
All right. Again, it says it's a 6. What it's trying to do now is, in a sense, to reorganize its memory so that it can classify this as a CE.
It's come up CE now.
Now it's come up CE.
My Lord, that's incredible.
Now, if I draw a 6, it still calls it a 6. So in a sense, as it's learning, it's redefining its idea of what a 6 is, what CE means, and what A means. It's learning in the same way that you and I do.
Gee, that's amazing.
Just by experience.
Yeah, that really is an amazing, I don't want to say shortcut, but it's an awfully quick way.
Actually, it's getting at the very heart of the problem in pattern recognition. The heart of the problem in pattern recognition is in a sense, the task that we have to do as we, in a sense, learn to move around in the world, and that is to extract, as from our experience, the useful features of the environment around us in order to define patterns. And so what our focus here is to build into these nested systems that same capability of learning that we see displayed around us in human beings.
Yes, I see. Would they be able? This would be able to be used in a practical sense then for handwriting recognition and so forth. And what would be some of the applications? Yeah, you do in a certain sense in the case of this. But if someone
word processing, you can imagine this being hooked up to some sort of any sort of computer in an office environment. And if you want to write a memo, you simply sit down and write a memo, and immediately it gets typed out in a sense on the screen in front of you, and you can get a hard copy of that if you wish. So it can revolutionize data entry into a computer system. And this particular demo is basically one in which the system is watching as you draw the pattern. You could be drawing numbers, you could be writing letters across the pad. You can imagine this being used by people who are doing design work on computers, in which basically they're drawing circuit symbols or perhaps writing mathematical equations, things that can be interpreted as patterns and entered into the computer and then recognized by the nested system as the appropriate classification.
You're working in conjunction with the keyboard, and what do you call this again, the pad?
This is it's called a bit pad. It's a digitizing tablet.
So then what it would be able to deal with would be what, are these two necessarily linked then? Or?
In fact, what you can imagine is that eventually the keyboard sort of disappears because the main way in which you will communicate with the computer would be through a bit pad. And
how would you correct it if it wasn't as you did with the CIE or the C?
What you can imagine is having on the bit pad, in a sense, a small box reserved which simulates the keys on a keyboard.
I see.
And if you wanted to correct it, you could touch the particular box on the bit pad which might describe the letter. But the basic method of entry would be through the bit pad, through drawing on it, drawing in very natural fashion.
I see. Gee, that really is an exciting development indeed. Is there could you maybe give us one more demonstration of how perhaps another...
Sure.
So what you're doing here now is...
The point to sort of emphasize is that we have not, in a sense, built a system that just recognizes numbers or letters. What we can draw are very arbitrary patterns.
That's what I was wondering. You've drawn the man,
a man,
stick figure, right?
Now I'm going to tell the nested system to assign this classification, the three-letter word man, to the stick figure.
Yeah.
And I'll draw it again. Now again, this is not an easy task.
No, I wouldn't think it would be.
All right. And the nested system looks at another example of it and says, I still don't know what it is.
It's got a what? It's a question mark has come back to. It's like...
I don't know.
Yes.
Like any child would tell you if you were trying to train it to recognize a character. And now
it has. Now it's picked up. Now it would, if you were to...
Now, it needs to see a number of examples in order to become sort of an expert at this. But the point is that, again, I'm drawing what are really very different looking stick figures.
Yes, indeed.
How you would describe these things mathematically.
How far away from the pattern that you're drawing could you get that it would still recognize it before it would be sensing a different pattern?
That's up to the system. When these systems are simulated, there are a number of different parameters that, in a sense, can describe how much, how willing the system is to generalize, or how cautious it is in terms of making a decision. It might insist that it would only call something very, very similar to this pattern as man, or it might be willing to, in a sense, be a little bit bolder in terms of its classifications and allow you to draw something that varies quite differently from this figure. So the point is here that these systems are generalizing, in the sense that they do not require you to draw exactly the same pattern again in order to learn the classification.
Within a certain parameter of system pattern recognition is what you have then, right?
These are systems that learn to do pattern recognition.
It's an incredible advance. It seems to me, as a layman, a tremendous advance, and it opens up tremendous avenues of, well, theoretical interest, intellectual interest, and so forth, and also great practical implications in terms of the utilization of this kind of a technology in everyday world problems and information technology.
Yes, that's exactly our feeling too.
Well, I'll tell you, we could go on. I don't want to say play. This is work, but it's very exciting and fun to do, to get the machine to do that. And I can see that there would be a great number of great interest. But you've got, man, we've been able to demonstrate, in a sense, and talk about theoretically what this involves. And I really thank you very, very much indeed for demonstrating that to us. It's all too brief, and there's a great deal more that could be demonstrated here. But it gives us an idea of what the kind of parameters of the system. And I would expect that you're probably going to be seeing more and more of these kind of systems within the general society increasingly as this technology finds its way into the general society, and we can all benefit from it. I congratulate you on your participation in it, and certainly thank you for participating and giving us that demonstration. Thank you. There's going to be more coming up. We'd ask you to stay tuned from demonstrating the Nestor Incorporated technology momentarily, so if we stay tuned, there'll be more coming up. That's it from headquarters Nestor here in Providence, Rhode Island. There'll be more. We're going to talk some more about it coming right back. And once again, Dr. Reilly, thank you very much indeed for participating here in the series.
Thank you.
We're back in the studio again with Ed, having looked at Rosenfeld again, the editor of Intelligence Magazine, the Future of Computing newsletter, who's looked at these various intelligence systems. And you've been familiar with Nestor before, but that really is an exciting development, that they can recognize those letters like that and sort of self-correct and so forth. It really represents a tremendously exciting development in terms of computing capability. I mean, you'd seen it before, but maybe you could share with us, and it's possible that they could recognize other languages, and the implications of that is important, isn't it? I mean, in terms of what Nestor here represents as a unique entity.
I was knocked out the first time I saw the Nestor demonstration, which was in the fall of 1984 at their first shareholders meeting. And I had just never seen anything like it. I had never seen a computer system that learned. I had read some theoretical discussions about different ways computer systems might learn. But the first time I saw somebody draw some figures on the bit pad and saw the system put up the question marks and then kind of fight its way to figure out what was being drawn, I thought, wow, it's really incredible. When I visited Nestor recently and I went up to the labs up in Providence, I saw them use the same system and worked with calligraphy. And as I understand it, they have a license with digital equipment to bring out a product that will recognize unconstrained handwritten characters. And I'm not sure exactly what that product is because it's under a lot of wraps and a lot of secrecy, and even the people at Nestor don't talk about it. But my guess is that it's really going to revolutionize certainly word processing in the Far East. I mean, if it can recognize Japanese calligraphy for years in Japan and in China, people have been writing things by hand. There are very few typewriters. There are very few, there are no word processing systems to speak of that aren't too cumbersome to use. So you can imagine the impact, certainly in the Far East or in any pictographic alphabet. If you can write a pictographic symbol and the machine itself can figure out what it is. More than just the 26 letters of our alphabet. I think this is going to be very promising. What turned me on about Nestor and got me so excited about Nestor is, one, I had never seen anything like it. Two, though the demonstration that we just saw and the ones that I've seen have to do with the recognition of handwritten characters, what I saw underneath all this, what I saw as the backbone of the Nestor system and what makes it so exciting is that this is a kind of a generic pattern recognition technology. So if you can recognize unconstrained handwritten characters, well then maybe you could recognize voice, or maybe you could recognize visual inputs. And I think that's where the future lies. I think Nestor will, and perhaps others, but certainly Nestor at this point has already started on the road to try and exploit this adaptive systems technology and try and go into other areas of pattern recognition besides just handwritten characters.
But at the moment, with the fact that they're also beginning to license with specific applications so that this brings products into the market and products into the society and so forth, they're in a class by themselves in a certain sense at this time.
At this point,
spotted that some time back.
I try and cover the field as closely as I can.
Yeah.
I try and read everything. I have people calling me, telling me what's new and what's going on.
Yeah.
And everybody who I've spoken to who knows anything about the Nestor system or has seen a demonstration the way we have says that they're alone in the field. There are other research efforts that are similar, but in terms of demonstrating a product, having something up and running, they're singularly unique. And recently, they had a major investment made in by Saul Steinberg, Reliance Holdings Group, and I think he invested $6 million with options to buy an additional 100,000 shares for another $1.5 million. And I think that will enable Nestor to go ahead with programs that I assume they have underway, which will be to build demonstrators in these other areas. I know officials of the company had mentioned to me that they were very excited about the prospects of working in the areas of pattern recognition in terms of voice recognition. And being able to recognize people's spoken words. Other efforts are going on, big companies like IBM, little companies like Kurzweil Applied Intelligence. I write about all these things, but I think Nestor has an interesting shot, not just with voice, but also with vision systems for robotics and other systems like that. So I think the Steinberg investment comes at the right time. And
smart man, Mr. Steinberg.
Probably so.
Yes, right.
It's a very exciting company, and at this point, they seem to have the only next-generation computer system around, and it's hard to say how two college professors from Brown University were able to beat IBM, to beat the Japanese fifth-generation effort, to beat the Alvey Directorate in England and the Esprit program in Europe. These are all multi-million-dollar programs dedicated to producing next-generation computer systems, and to my knowledge, Nestor is the first one out there in the marketplace. When DEC markets this product, I expect it'll be sometime this fall. This will be the first next-generation computer system to actually reach the marketplace.
This is actually, in your estimation, like a fifth generation or a fourth and a half generation or a new generation? Well, there are developments going in various areas of computing.
The fifth generation was a kind of catchphrase that came out of the Japanese program, and we owe a lot to the Japanese. I think the Japanese set future computing as a goal and said this is an important place for us to put our money and to start developing. And the 5 generations, the first generation was vacuum tubes, the second generation was transistors, third generation was integrated circuits, and we're in the 4th generation now, which is what's called very large-scale integrated circuits, hundreds of thousands of transistors, resistors, capacitors, and other components on a chip the size of a fingernail.
Yes, right.
And the 5th generation is supposed to be the implementation of artificial intelligence technologies through VLSI. So in one sense, no, Nestor hasn't done it on a very large-scale integrated chip, but they could.
Well, they're coming at it from a different. Aren't they coming at it from a different strategy?
Well, it's a company
that crunch all those big figures, and
they're licensing their technology to other companies, so it'll be up to other companies to develop that. They recently made an arrangement with a very large insurance company in France, and they're going to adapt the Nestor system to work through an IBM PC, a personal computer. And this will be the first time that such a powerful system will be ported to a computer. So that's an exciting development we can look forward to in the next year or so.
Yeah, it is. It really is an exciting development, and it's developing. I'm trying to think. The signature recognition is something that's going to be a possibility of this. So that would be some of the applications of this that we're likely to see in the, let's say, in society. I mean, in the world, the recognition of handwriting is going to be a big factor that it has in terms of products and actual application of this in products as we begin to look ahead. I mean,
well, I don't know whether the Nestor system is configured currently can recognize connected, unconstrained handwritten characters. I've never seen a demonstration of that technology. They can recognize individual letters unconstrained. Whether they can recognize connective letters is probably a trade secret at this point. I think fingerprint recognition, handwriting recognition, recognition of the pattern in the eye is another means used for identification. I think these are the special interest application areas, but I think the broader pattern recognition areas voice and vision. I keep coming back to them because that's the way we interact with each other. So if we had computer systems that could see us, could understand the configuration of our facial expression, and also understand the words we were saying, that would go a long way to facilitate communication between human beings and computers. And so I think voice and vision are going to be the real major product application areas for development in the near future.
There's a great deal of interest in the company now, and as you say, you and others and other people have. Do you think they're setting a pace that there's likely to be a lot of people following along the research path and course that they've set? And
I think so. I just saw a front-page article on British news magazine, The Economist, talking about when computers will think, and they were going over a variety of the research developments in this very area, what they call the connectionist schemes of massively parallel distributed systems, and Nestor falls into this general category. I think the future is going to show a shift from the major emphasis that's on expert systems. I think there'll always be expert systems, but I think we may, in the future, make expert systems out of these adaptive systems, so that our expert systems won't be just limited to the rules that we're able to teach them, but in fact we'll be able to discover rules that we haven't taught the system to recognize, that the system itself learns to recognize. So I think adaptive systems are definitely a growth area for the future, and Nestor so far is the best example of such systems.
It's an interesting success story in a certain sense, in a real sense, as you say. IBM, others have been not working in that direction, or where does this put the United States in terms of the broad question of international competition, computer development, and so forth? It's a major plus for
I think it's
the
a plus that
American leadership position in terms of computer technology and so forth?
I think it's a plus that a small entrepreneurial company started by two college professors could have come so far to beat everybody else to the punch in this area. I think that IBM, the major computer companies, many of whom have banded together in a consortium called MCC, being run by former Admiral Bobby Ray Inman.
Yeah, what does that stand, MCC?
Microelectronics and Computer Technology Corporation, which they abbreviate as MCC. And that's a consortium of about 20 different major companies, including Control Data and RCA and Harris and many other large companies, and they're banding together and looking at the areas that Nestor is involved in, looking at the expert systems area, looking at very large-scale integration, variety of other applications of futuristic computing technologies and artificial intelligence. And I think that Nestor, MCC, IBM, the Department of Defense's Strategic Computing Initiative, where they're now working on projects to build future computer systems. I think this all gives the United States a very, very good position, but you can't count the Japanese out. The Japanese have already started a sixth-generation effort to try and match what Nestor, in essence, has started, and the sixth-generation effort wants to build computers that are modeled more like the physiological and anatomical organization of the human brain. So they want to build computers more like brains.
They're going that way, back to that model that had been abandoned in the late 60s and so forth. That's being recaptured and so forth.
Right, and captured also at Caltech and at Carnegie Mellon and at a variety of European universities, as well as in the Japanese research community.
And we do take a model of brain or biophysiology or neurophysiology in order to develop. The course where they went was through a model of neurophysiology. And so
that's exactly right. They looked at the way that they saw memory being stored, as imperfect as our understanding of these highly complex systems are. And from that model, they abstracted a series of algorithms or formulas that enable the Nestor system, as one very fine example, to achieve the kind of pattern recognition that it does.
Yeah, it's an incredibly exciting development. And from your perspective it is, and I mean from a general perspective it is exciting development as these things exponentially increase and we begin to move increasingly into an information environment. This is one major seminal development that it's good for us to be aware of and so forth, just at a general level. And it's going to have profound effects to the organization of our society as we move into this information environment.
I think it's possible in the next 3 to 5 years that we may end up talking to our computers and having them actually understand us as much as we understand each other.
Voice-activated things?
Right.
Yeah.
And as these pattern recognition technologies become more sophisticated and have more applications developed, I think it'll just make computers easier to use and more ubiquitous in the society. They're already everywhere we turn.
Yeah, almost,
I think they're going to become more portable, friendlier, easier to use, more helpful, and certainly more powerful.
And the research and learning beat goes on as we begin to progress more and more. It just comes at such a fast rate. Now it makes it extremely exciting and profitable time to be thinking in these matters and so forth. I suppose you'd be a sense of satisfaction of having recognized this early in a very real sense. And so
if you can call last year early.
Yeah, well, in these terms it is, I guess.
Right. It's an eternity in the computer world.
Yeah,
a year.
Right. And things will be moving even faster as we move into this exciting future. As Leon Cooper says, if we have the future, it will be one that incorporates these kind of things. Well, I'll tell you, we're running out of time, unfortunately, for this segment. I want to thank you very much, Ed, for coming down again. It's nice talking to you, and wish you all the best with the newsletter Intelligence. You sure have been tracking things in a seminal kind of an interesting way. And thanks for filling us in on Nestor, because you know, it's an exciting development, and it's good that someone who really does understand this clearly, as you do, can help fill it in. I really appreciate that very much.
Harold, my pleasure. Nice to see you again.
Not at all. Once again, we'd like to thank you for viewing this evening. To remind you, it has been your pleasure to have the perceptions of Ed Rosenfeld, the editor and founder of Intelligence, the newsletter subtitled The Future of Computing, an extremely important piece of information and direction in terms of computing developments, and of course the people from Nestor Incorporated, a leading edge developer of a leading edge technology here within the American economy. Happy to have been able to bring you those perceptions, and we would like to invite you to tune in again next week, where we'll be coming back again the same time, same station. So see you then, and that's it for this evening. See you next week, and good night.